Chapter 6. Conclusion. At the time of the restoration of the gospel, there came a special need for a tried and proved people. To establish and promulgate the gospel, the saints would have to face mobs, jails, and death for the principles of their religion. Miracles became a necessity, and the Mormon people found the intervention of angels and revelations from God a common experience. In the settling of a barren wasteland, struggling with savage Indians, facing famine and poverty while devoting a lifetime in missionary work, these special people required more than just a belief in their sacrifices. Under such circumstances, the saints needed an outstanding courage, supreme faith, and a positive assurance that all of their sufferings and sacrifices were acceptable to God. It is through such stress and among such a people that God can and will send His angels. It was during those trying and crucial years of church history that these three disciples made the greatest number of appearances. On the other hand, within the past 50 or more years, these disciples have visited mankind relatively few times. It is the increase of iniquity and the decrease of faith that cause the angels and messengers of God to cease their blessings and visitations. When men trust in God, alloy their faith in the heavens, and obey the principles of the gospel, then miracles, angels, and gifts of the Spirit are manifest. These disciples are laboring just as they did centuries ago, administering relief to the sick, comforting the discouraged, and blessing the poor. And one of the special marks of the divine calling of the disciples of Christ is their method of performing their ministry. They travel as all of the apostles of old traveled, without purse or scrip. See Matt 10:9-10. These three disciples still honor that commandment and travel as they did anciently. This commandment was reiterated in our own time when the Lord commanded every elder to obey that rule in this dispensation. Said He, "Therefore, let no man among you, for this commandment is unto all the faithful who are called of God in the church unto the ministry, from this hour take purse or scrip, that goeth forth to proclaim this gospel of the kingdom. And whoso receiveth you, there I will be also, for I will go before your face. I will be on your right hand and on your left, and my spirit shall be in your hearts, and mine angels round about you, to bear you up. Whoso receiveth you, receiveth me, and the same will feed you, and clothe you, and give you money. And he who feeds you, or clothes you, or gives you money shall in no wise lose his reward. And he that doeth not these things is not my disciple. By this you may know my disciples." D&C 84-86, 89-91. Early pioneers left their families and friends to traverse the globe. For years they traveled without purse or scrip among the nations. They left blessings upon all who helped and believed in their heavenly message, while those who belligerently rejected them and their message were sealed up to judgment. The labor of the three Nephites is the same today as it was anciently. They are yet traveling without purse or scrip among all people, asking for a little food or water, and then leave their blessing. A greater portion of the work of the Lord has always been among the poor and the needy. However, the prophet Joseph Smith, Brigham Young, and others had prophesied that the Lord would someday pour untold wealth into the hands of His people. In the statement of Mr. Fisher, he quotes a part of a Nephite message, which indicates that wealth would become a great part of God's final work among His people. The full choiceness of this land was being withheld because the people of the world would desire it and get it away from us if it were to be permitted to blossom in fullness, and that this was God's way of protecting the land for His work and His people. John E. Fisher Statement, May 15, 1921. This Nephite message may be part of one of the most famous of all Nephite stories, their appearance to a Mormon bishop in Leland, Utah, in the year 1894. This bishop said they had appointed to him a special work, not in the ecclesiastical realm of the church, but rather with a special mining project. Bishop John H. Coyle was reluctant to accept the appointment and responsibility. His account of the Nephites has been the most controversial, receiving the most publicity pro and con of any other Nephite story. His account has been the basis for some church authorities buying stock, while others became vigorously opposed to the entire project. Many family members have been divided in their support of the mine, and yet both Mormons and non-Mormons alike own stock in this Coyle relief mine. John H. Coyle was told by the messengers not to put anything into writing or to sign any statements concerning the mine. However, the essence of what he told concerning the mine is about as follows. When I was taken through the mine for the first time in 1894 after being shown the body of rich ore beneath the capstone, I was told that the ancient inhabitants of this land had at one time discovered these riches and had mined out these 9 large caverns, which form the southwest portion of this great body of gold ore. Then the values had been shut off from them, and would be shut off from us too, if we also became lifted up in pride and hard-hearted, using this wealth for self-gratification. Then I was taken southwest through a steep tunnel that had been made by this ancient people, coming out in Water Canyon. It is there now. Some of our men have been up there and have seen where the caved-in entrance is located, and some have been able to crawl in it a ways with a long stick and judge the diameter to be about 10 feet. They made better tunnels than we make. There is another old caved-in mine just across the canyon from it with some ancient petroglyphs or hieroglyphs by the entrance, depicting a string of peculiar pack animals coming out of the mine with packs on their backs, and another string of them going down into the mine without any loads. Someday you will see that there is an underground connection between these two mines, and how both hold unusual treasures that will be of great benefit to us. Then there is an ancient Nephite highway, built like a railroad grade, running from the mouth of Water Canyon over to Payson Mountain, where there is an old slag dump, where it looks like they refined their ore. Some say this old grade was made by the ancient Lake Bonneville, but no one is able to explain how this old lake could have made a borrow pit along the upper side of this grade. The really important objectives are those which the messenger showed to me, and they were impressed so vividly on my mind, it was as though I had spent a lifetime then and there working tunnels through them. Yes, I know them off by heart. That is why I have been able to tell the men about places before we get to them. The messenger showed me those great strata breaks inside the mountain that tip back to the west. These large strata breaks were to mark just about the end of a long tunnel that we were to make to connect with our deep shaft from the top where we started. And near these breaks, we would also find two natural walls which would be in line with the walls of our long straight tunnel, and these walls would also be near the turn-down place leading to the capstone, where the formation would be so soft that we might have to square set the shaft for the 90 or 100 feet leading to the caprock. This caprock would be so hard that even though it was only 3 or 4 feet thick, it would require a month or two to drill through it, and there would be almost a continuous chain of sharp drills coming in to replace the dull ones going out. Under this caprock, we will find a very rich chimney of white quartz containing leaf gold, dipping down about 175 feet and coming out into the 9 large caverns that contain these great Nephite treasures that are beyond your belief to imagine. This messenger talked to me freely and answered my questions as one man would talk to another. He was exceedingly anxious that all the details of the mine be fixed clearly in my mind, and as we went along, he pointed out all of these ore bodies so plainly that I can never forget them, nor where they are located. The Dream Mine Story, H.C. Pierce, page 6-8. The story, along with many prophecies, began to create a profound impact over the years. Dr. Lowry Nelson, prominent BYU and USU government sociologist, called this mining operation the largest social group movement within the church in the entire history of the church, and yet independent of the church organization itself. On one occasion, Bishop Coyle described 2 of the messengers and the visit which he experienced with them. It was on the Saturday following the Tuesday on which the tunnel was begun, being about 5 o'clock in the morning, January 10, 1914. Bishop John H. Coyle was lying awake in his bed at the mine, contemplating a very remarkable dream he had just had, when all of a sudden a powerful vibrating influence came over him, lasting several minutes. No sooner had it left than it reoccurred stranger than ever. And when it came back for the 3rd time, he raised up in his bed, when to his amazement, 2 men dressed in gray clothes having white hair and beards, one taller than the other, came walking up to his bedside. The shorter one did all of the talking, and declared that he and his companion were 2 of the 3 Nephite apostles of old, who had divine custody of this mine. He informed Bishop Coyle that he had started the tunnel in the correct place, and that he would get everything he had been shown in his first dream or spiritual entry into the mountain. However, false rumors and stories of the most malicious and unwholesome character about him and the mine would soon arise through the activity of the adversary, who, because he had been unable to influence the workers at the mine, would now concentrate his efforts on the people in the valley below. Then, after carefully outlining the future in a conversation that lasted fully 2 hours, they departed, promising him that both men and money would always come to his assistance until all the great objectives had been reached and he had been fully vindicated. He was not to be too much concerned about the ridicule and persecution that would be heaped upon him, because in the end he and his companions would occupy a position of honor in the eyes of the church, while those who had opposed and ridiculed him would be fully discredited and brought to account for their actions. Before his 2 heavenly visitors departed, they gave him a final warning in addition to the charge that he must not reveal the hour and a half portion of their 2-hour conversation. First, he must never at any time write anything, nor make any written statements about the nature of this mining operations. And second, he was not to allow brothers to be on the board of directors at the same time. As they departed, the end of the cabin faded from view, and they passed through it and continued on to the brow of the hill, where they turned and waved a final goodbye to the mortal man whom they had charged with such great responsibilities. The Dream Mine Story, pages 14 to 15. The mine was to experience some serious difficulties before it was to bring forth the desired gold. In a dream, Bishop Coyle was shown that black clouds would cover the mine and weigh so heavily that there appeared to be no hope for it to come forth. The mine would appear to be finished and abandoned. When it seemed as if all was lost and the dream mine had come to complete failure, he looked from the mine, while standing on Nob Hill over to the northwest toward the point of the mountain, and beheld a small rift in the dark clouds, revealing a little spot of blue about the size of a man's hand. As he watched it, this rift suddenly expanded, and with a majestic sweep, the heavens were cleared of these dark, black, oppressive clouds, and the mine and surroundings were restored to the brilliant sunshine of a fine, glorious day, with all oppressiveness having vanished. Bishop Coyle occasionally spoke of a long shutdown, and also a short shutdown that the mine must experience. Most of us, including the bishop himself, thought that the long shutdown must be the one in the past from 1914 to 1920, but history was to prove that it was yet in the future. He saw that the miners would leave the hill, even he would not be there. The stockholders would be at bitter loggerheads with each other, and some who had been the best of friends now would be enemies. Two of the directors would turn their backs on the mine, while the others would not be of much use to it. Some of the stock would change hands for as little as 10 cents a share, while others would even regard it as worthless. In fact, it would appear as though this whole project was at long last finished and dead, once and for all. For that matter, mining elsewhere in Utah would be dead or in a very dilapidated condition. He would point to the Tintic-Eureka district and to Bingham Canyon while saying this, and years later when Geneva Steel was built, he included that too, saying it would also be shut down. One day back in the 20s, he called Otto Lomelder, one of the miners, aside and told him, "Otto, towards the end there's going to be a group of men take over this mine and try to bring it in before it is time for it to come in. But they will not have the proper guidance and inspiration, and they will fail." He spoke of a short shutdown at the very end, following which a couple of old-timers, properly inspired, would come up and put in just a round or two of holes and strike the rich ore. He said that the first shipment out of this tunnel would return every dollar invested. When pressed to tell how much the first shipment would run, he declared that it would be around $12,000 a ton on the low grade, while the high grade that would come a little later would be worth much more, almost beyond belief. The ore would come just in the nick of time to provide very much needed relief. In fact, there would be some who said that it had come in too late to do any good, but such would not be the case, for the stockholders would rally together, and things would move swiftly on every side to accomplish all that was supposed to be accomplished. The first shipment, he said, would not cause much of a stir, but the second one, which would come right on the heels of the first one, would cause great excitement. The people would rush to the mine waving the money in their hands, wanting to buy stock, but the company had none for sale to them. They had come too late. So many of them came that there would be a traffic jam for some distance back. Nevertheless, we would offer them relief in their distress from our bank and from our food supplies. When it was time for the mine to turn out, he said, there was a light-complexioned man with white hair who would come from north of the mine with a big check to finance the first shipment of ore. The stockholders would rally with him and bring about many wonderful changes around the mine, and soon a beautiful white city would be built there for the people to live in who were associated with this great project. There would be a radio station, power plants, and an airport arise in swiftly moving events at the mine. Leading up to all this, he declared, there would be an inflation. He was shown in a dream how the prices of everything became greatly inflated. They were raised up way out of proportion to actual values, as if they were up on high stilts or props, growing ever higher. Then after a time some of the props began to give way, causing minor setbacks, and then the government would try desperately to restore these props. Then all of a sudden it was as if something overnight kicked the props out from under the entire price structure, and the whole thing came down with a terrific crash. Values dropped to something like 20 cents on the dollar, and wheat, which we would be buying for our grain bins on the hill, could be purchased for 50 and 60 cents a bushel, and other things in proportion. We would have our gold and be able to buy our wheat supplies barely in the nick of time, he said, because in a short time the situation would grow so bad that all of the automobiles and trains would stop running, and manufacturing would ease because of a complete breakdown in our economy. About this time transportation would stop all over the country, and manufacturing would cease, and the people would have to return to their horses, if they had any, or go on foot. Then we could no longer buy any wheat because there was no way to get to where the big supplies were located, nor could it be brought to us, and those who did have any wheat on hand would not sell it for a bushel of gold. Then the really big troubles began with famine, warfare, plagues and judgments, and we would have to make White City and the Dream Mine into a fortress to protect ourselves from ravaging mobs. In many places, he said, the dead would outnumber the living, while in others there would not even be enough living to bury the dead. This mine was to come forth in a time of national and international peril, when a world economic crisis had occurred, and the people would need relief. The mine was to be called the Relief Mine. At the time when famine and financial collapse would occur in this land and all others, great spiritual and temporal strength of the saints would be necessary. Thousands and even millions, said Brigham Young and Heber C. Kimball, would pour into these valleys for relief and protection. The mine, Bishop Coyle was told, was for that purpose. Some have referred to the Book of Mormon prophecy dealing with the special work of the Nephites, which is to come forth in the last days. Therefore, great and marvelous works shall be wrought by them, the three Nephites, before the great and coming day, when all people must surely stand before the judgment seat of Christ, yea, even among the Gentiles, shall there be a great and marvelous work wrought by them, before that judgment day. 3 Nephi 28:31-32. To many, only time itself will establish the truth of this famous Nephite story, as well as many of the others. It would be a grand and glorious experience for us if we, too, might enjoy the society of these messengers. As Orson Pratt described, how pleasant, how glorious it would be, if we had proved ourselves in all things, if we had become pure in heart, with no unbelief, no evil, no abominations, but our hearts perfectly pure before God, if we could behold his smiling face, and look upon him, and hear the words of his mouth, pronouncing blessings upon our heads. Would not this be worth sacrificing all things? Yes, how pleasing, how glorious it would be, could we see those three old Nephites whose prayers have ascended up, for something like 1800 years, in behalf of the children of men in the last days, and have them return to their old native land, and find the kingdom of God prepared and pure to receive them, and could we hear their teachings, and their voices lifted up in our midst? Should not this be cheering to our hearts? Yes. Is there anything too great for us to suffer or endure, or any sacrifice too great for us to make to be prepared to receive blessings of this description? No. Then let us wake up, and be assured that just as soon as we prepare ourselves for these blessings, so soon they will be upon our heads. Do you suppose that these three Nephites have any knowledge of what is going on in this land? They know all about it. They are filled with the spirit of prophecy. Why do they not come into our midst? Because the time has not come. Why do they not lift up their voices in the midst of our congregations? Because there is a week for us to do preparatory to their reception, and when that is accomplished, they will accomplish their work, unto whomsoever they desire to minister. If they shall pray to the Father, says the Book of Mormon, in the name of Jesus, they can show themselves unto whatsoever person or people they choose. The very reason they do not come amongst us is because we have a work to do preparatory to their coming, and just as soon as that is accomplished, they are on hand, and also many other good old worthy ancients, that would rejoice our hearts, could we behold their countenances, and hear them recite over the scenes they have passed through, and the history of past events, as well as prophecy of the events to come. How great and how precious are the promises of the Lord contained in ancient revelation. J.D. 264. Though the paradise of God is filled with magnificent beauty, and great rewards awaited them there and in the resurrection, these three valiant men chose to remain in the ministry of their Lord in this fallen and depraved world. These messengers have seen every form of suffering and sorrow among men, and they feel great sorrow themselves when they see such suffering. Only their love of God could induce them to continue laboring in such a thankless and sorrowful world. These three messengers of God have witnessed the Dark Ages, the Crusades, the Reformation and the Restoration. They are acquainted with the torturing of men by men, and the destruction of men through all his wars. They again look with remorse upon the rapid deterioration and the evident destruction of mankind, just as they saw it happen to their own nation, their efforts to warn and prevent having seemingly little effect upon mankind. For nearly 2,000 years these servants of Christ have borne an unusual burden in the ministry of the gospel. In view of such an unprecedented labor of love, how much more we should honor their efforts to help us. No one really knows how much influence they have had in our own lives, or in those of our neighbors. Because of their noble example of service and love of Christ, we should greatly respect the message and mission of these angels of God, the three Nephites.